Here. So I'm sure we'll have more people joining in as we just hit 9 here. But I am going to go ahead and just chat a little bit while we're waiting and getting started with this. So today is just going to be a talk. We are talking about sound sensitivity, things that you can do to help with it, ways you can work on preventing it, and then also just digging into it itself to look a little bit more deeply into genetics and things that we're finding in research and medical treatment and all this kind of stuff to just kind of dig a little deeper into the world of sound sensitivity. In research studies done evaluating dog behavior, sound sensitivity is one of the most common behavior problems amongst all dogs. And so sound sensitivity is something also that can happen at any time, right? So a lot of times what happens is people think their dogs are fine because they don't show any sound sensitivity at all as a young dog. And the first 2 or 3 years, they're absolutely fine with 4th of July and fireworks and things like that going on. And then all of a sudden, a couple of years later, everything changes and the dog's suddenly worried about sounds and suddenly worried about things like that going on. So it is something that is important for all pet owners to understand because it can affect a dog at any time in their life. I had a border collie that I had rescued that he was bomber proof, right? He never had any issues. And then at 10 years old, he suddenly developed severe sound sensitivity to fireworks after one single learning event. So you can definitely have this kind of thing start at any time. And when you see it starting, the earlier you take action and start working on it, the easier it is for you to get this problem back under control and to help your dogs and to have a really good plan of being able to help them through this issue. So it's definitely something to just keep yourself educated on and keep yourself aware of so that if you start to see your dog suddenly showing issues to it, you have a plan on how to work on that. So let's look a little bit. I'm going to, again, hold off just a little bit before I start the slideshow in case there's more people coming in. I don't want to miss them waiting to come in the waiting room. But first of all, for those of you in the group who have puppies, it's really important that you're working preventatively on sound sensitivity desensitizing programs because you can help your dogs so much by giving them experience with novel sounds and helping them get used to these ideas in a really slow, gentle, easy way as part of your dog training and just working these things in so that your dog has experience by the time they're like, oh yeah, I'm used to fireworks playing in the background while I play ball. Oh yeah, I'm used to hearing gunshots whenever these things are happening, right? So if you can do some of this preventative work with your young dogs, you can really help quite a bit. We are going to talk later about certain types of sound sensitivity that doesn't mean your dog won't have an issue with it, but it's definitely important to know that. It's also important to know that it doesn't have to be volume and it doesn't have to be what we consider scary noises for a dog to be sensitive to. Some dogs can develop severe sound sensitivity to like the click of a cell phone. I know so many dogs that have they'll just run out of the room whenever they hear the little dings that go on somebody's text notifications. So your dogs can develop sound sensitivities to any novel noises. So keep that in mind if you're seeing your dog give weird responses whenever weird sounds are happening, or they're just acting weird and you haven't tied it to a sound. It could be. So if your dog just suddenly starts shaking and leaving the room, right? And you're like, what is going on with my dog? And you don't realize it because it's just your cell phone and you think that's no problem. Start to try to pay attention to what's happening around because you may see that they are actually triggering to a sound that they're hearing that you yourself don't understand that's what's the problem. And also their hearing is way, way better than ours. So a lot of times they can be hearing things off in the distance that we're not even actually able to pick up on. So we're gonna go a little bit into kind of the preventative things and sides of things. I'll be stopping periodically to ask you guys questions and to see if you have any questions that you have as we're moving through this. But we're gonna see if we can get through as much of this as possible. So the first thing is when we're dealing with puppies, obviously socialization is super important, but if that socialization is inducing fear responses in your dog, it's actually not good socialization. So when we talk about these sound desensitizing programs, the idea is not to flood your puppy with the sounds of fireworks all the time whenever they're in the house playing, thinking that's going to make them better. So if your dog is acting fearful and startling to these sounds, that's not what we're after. We're not going to just keep exposing them to a lot of noise, hoping that makes them get better. If they are showing fear responses, we need to change what we're doing. And if we can't change in that moment what's happening, we need to get out of there. So whenever possible, avoid or minimize those sounds that are frightening your dog, because if you keep exposing them to those, instead of habituating to it and getting more comfortable, they can go the other way and get more sensitized to it and more fearful about it. So the answer is not more whenever the dog is showing fear and anxiety. The answer is to do whatever you can do to get away from that in that moment. And then we come back and we work those noises in a more slow, gentle way to kind of help our dogs. So let's talk about some of the behaviors and body language that you can see with a dog that is showing fear and showing responses to noise sensitivity. So physically, what you oftentimes see in a dog is they get those big wide eyes with the, you see the whites of their eyes around, and they're kind of like sitting and like looking around, trying to identify where this sound is, what it is. They'll a lot of times pin their ears back, or they're doing the little helicopter ears that are just going, where is it, where is it, where is it, where is it, trying to locate the sound. So you can see a lot of actions with their ears. A lot of times you're going to see the furrowed brows and the muscle tension. They'll sometimes even kind of do that little, where they pinch their cheeks up and you start to see like a really tense pant. Tucked tails, crunched body, hunched body, just self-protection, defensive position. You see that quite a bit with dogs. Shaking, excessive panting are usually pretty big with dogs that are in the midst of being afraid of the sound that's going on. Hiding, your dog's, you're sitting there watching TV and suddenly your dog's like trying to like climb under the table or get into the closet. Hiding in closets is often a really big one, or hiding under the bed. Those are things that we see a lot. Whining, pacing around the house, destructive behavior, right? I had a dog that would literally throw herself at a wall and try to climb up it. She was so panicked whenever she heard fireworks going off. She would just, and just literally just start clawing. She's just stuck in flight mode, trying to just get out and run. And so you can see that kind of stuff. Some dogs will pee or have a poo and have inappropriate elimination because they just get so scared. Again, as I described, some dogs have severe escape attempts, bolting. You're walking down the street, they hear a noise and they're just the end of the leash, just trying to race away in whatever direction. And some dogs will self-harm. As a vet tech, we had dogs that jumped through windows, jumped out of second-story windows, like just were so panic stricken. They were not thinking clearly at all. Those are obviously extreme cases. We're talking total phobic at this point, but those things can happen with dogs. Sometimes we have a strong correlation between separation anxiety and noise sensitivity, right? So your dog's home alone and suddenly a thunderstorm wraps up or something like that gets going and your dog panics. And so sometimes that can be one of the things that can kind of go along with separation anxiety, trigger separation anxiety, or we can see some of these destructive behaviors actually related to being afraid of the noises that are happening when you're gone. So we don't see all of this in all dogs, right? Some of the dogs will just shake, right? Some of the dogs will just, shut inside themselves and just look super tense and worried. Some of them will just be pacing around the house and unsettled. So it's not like you're going to see all these things in every dog, but just things to be on the lookout for if you suddenly see some of these behaviors in your dog and you can't quite figure out what it is. And oh, here rolls in a thunderstorm that you didn't even hear coming, and the dog's reacting to that. So those are some of the common things that we see with puppies and puppy prevention. Ideally, what we want to do is we want to introduce lots of novel sounds at low volume levels, right? So if you on our groups on the website, I have sound playlists, right? So under the reactivity, I have that. And under just the playlist list, I have sound where there's so many playlists that you can do. There's fireworks, there's thunderstorms, there's baby noises, there's traffic noises, there's just tons of different sounds that are available there. A lot of them are roped into long playlists, like hour-long playlists that you can just put on in the background at really, really low volume levels while you're playing and interacting with your puppy. So what I basically, so if you're having a preventative program, you're basically just going to put the volume down at a level that you can see your dog's not startling or reacting to it. If you have a dog that's already suffering from noise sensitivity and already worried about it, you're actually going to take the volume all the way down to 0 and click it up just 1. Ideally, you can't even tell if the dog hears it. You're like, I think this is ridiculous. I'm doing nothing. I can't hear it. How can they possibly hear it? That's where you start. You start so low, you don't even know if the dog can hear it. And then basically what you do is you stay at that level for a few days. You put it on when your dog is comfortable, they're relaxed, you're going to do something fun with them. You can give them snuffle mats, you can play with them, you can do tricks, you're just going to have some fun while that's playing in the background, right? So then we just gradually, as the weeks go along, click the volume up. If at any point we see the dog's ears flinching or them startling, we put it back down, right? We don't want that. We don't want them scared of the noise. We want it coming in so slowly and so gradually that they're just getting desensitized to it, right? So that's what we're trying to do at this, introducing at super low levels and gradually moving it up. If we have our puppies out in the world, and there's a scary sound that happens, they're showing fear, they're showing discomfort. If you can make space or get them away from the volume, you do that. Try to not make a fuss, be upbeat, feed them, play with them, and be like, oh, hey, let's go over here. It's normal to startle to a scary sound, right? That's totally normal. What we want to do is help them to let go of it as quickly as possible by showing them we're not scared, we're not worried, and hey, let's go over here and think about doing something else, so they're not sitting there like holding on to that. Also, with puppies, we want to think about their developmental stages and timing of training and what we're exposing them to. So those first 2 weeks when they come home, this is not the time when you're going to flood them with new sounds. They're still trying to figure out their world. They're still trying to figure out life. They're in a pretty strong imprinting period. So during this time, I'm not going to go out of my way to be introducing new sounds or new noises. I want my dog to feel stable and comfortable. I'm going to put that off until they've been home for a couple of weeks. If it happens, right, say I get a puppy and like the next day there's a horrible thunderstorm going on, right? I'm going to do everything I can do to try to make that as non-traumatic as possible. I'm going to go inside of a room. Like maybe I'm going to go hang out in the hall where there's no outside windows. I'm going to try to get into the quietest room in my house that I can. I'm going to put on music to drown out that background noise if possible. I'm going to play with my puppy. We're going to play food toys. We're going to have fun. I'm going to do the engagement exercises. I'm going to just be like, hey, you're nothing to worry about. We're safe. We're just going to kind of tuck into this little spot. I'm going to do everything I can try to do to protect that moment if I can, while staying relaxed and upbeat myself. With female dogs, as they're approaching their first heat cycle, they get really emo, right? They get really emotional. So oftentimes that 3 to 4 weeks before their heat cycle, right up until they come into season, they're super sensitive. They're hypersensitive to a lot of things. That's again, another time where I'm going to try to do everything I can do to protect them during any kind of big, scary event. So if it's 4th of July, if it's the thunderstorm rolling through, stuff like that, I'm going to be on the proactive side and kind of have a plan that I can make sure that I'm helping them through that, and not just going to assume that they'll be fine with it, because they can really be silly whenever they've got that kind of stuff going on and tag on to things that they've never worried about before. So I'm going to think about those things. You always want to have a plan with any puppy if you live in an area where there are major firework events, right? So here it's 4th of July, New Year's. You guys in other countries have other holidays, right? Your own ones. A lot of you guys coming through COVID that live in cities, like it was ridiculous. Where we had people firing off fireworks every night for celebrating, or people just home bored with things like that. Some of you live in rural areas where on Saturday and Sunday, people love to shoot their guns, right? And so that's what we have here. If you go hiking on Saturdays and Sundays, oftentimes there's people out target practicing. And so it's like, boom, boom, boom. So you want to have plans for those events. So here, for when I get a puppy, the couple of months leading up to 4th of July, like right now, I would be working fireworks sound sensitivity in my training every day with my puppy. I just have it on in the background, right? I would just, when I feed him breakfast, I have those fireworks playing in the background. When I play with them with their toys in the evening, I'd have those fireworks playing on the background. Again, remembering to do those volume increases at slow levels. So make sure you have a plan. I strongly recommend that you have a talk with your veterinarian and find out what they recommend that you have on hand if your puppy is having a problem, because it's a holiday and it can be really hard to get any help on a 4th of July or on a weekend or on a major holiday when the vet clinics are either closed or the emergency clinics are flooded with real emergencies, and they're not going to maybe have time to talk to you about your dog that's scared from fireworks. So talk to them beforehand and have them coach you on what medications you can use, what things are safe to give. Have them give you that beforehand, especially the first events, right? So if it's your puppy's first 4th of July, and a lot of times the night before people start firing stuff off and you see your puppy's already having problems with it. Well, if you have medication on board at home and you have your management plan on board, you can really minimize the amount of fear that they're feeling during that event. So definitely talk to your veterinarian, find out what they recommend. We'll talk a little bit about some of those medications later on, but I'm not a vet, so I'm not going to tell you what you should use. You definitely need to talk to your own vet about that. But get that stuff ahead of time. If you have a dog that has sound sensitivity already, hopefully you've already done that, and you should always have something on hand so that if something happens, you're not stuck without it, and you can help your dog until you are able to get to a veterinarian for more help. Medications, definitely, there are some that work better than others, and it's something that is, even if it doesn't make the dog totally okay, it can minimize what they're experiencing. So at least it's not adding way more on to the event that's happening. So definitely you want to talk to your veterinarian about having stuff on hand. There are strong genetic components to sound sensitivity. So when you get a puppy, ask them, ask them how, you know, in gun dog training, they do tests as far as like seeing how, before they breed dogs, like how stable are these dogs with gunshot noise, right? It's part of temperament tests for a lot of the protection breeds and a lot of the gun dog breeds, because they have to be gun steady. So you want to know if you're the mom of your puppy like runs and hides in the closet every time a thunderstorm rolls through, or 4th of July, the odds are your puppy's gonna maybe struggle with that. That doesn't mean don't get that puppy, but that means have your plans and be proactive about it ahead of time, because the odds are definitely going to be increased if your dog comes from parents that struggle with sound sensitivities themselves. When you have a puppy and a scary noise happens, you know, it's normal for us all to go, right? Like, right. And that kind of stuff, like we startle and the dogs startle. They're gonna, if they're a young puppy, they're gonna look at you, right? They're gonna like look at you. How do you feel about this? And if you're like, it's okay, it's all right, we're okay, that was all right, they're gonna be like, oh my God, that was really a big deal, wasn't it? So just be like, take a deep breath and be, hey, do you want to play ball? Right? Here's a cook. Let's do some sits. Let's do some downs. Try to just be cool, play it cool, roll into the next thing, right? Like try not to make a big fuss about it, and try to get their minds on something else as quickly as you can. If they are truly scared, it is okay to comfort them, right? We're going to talk about that. It's totally fine. Do not believe the thing that petting your dog and telling them it's okay is going to reinforce them for being scared. They don't want to be scared. It's okay to comfort them. But what works best with a young puppy trying to figure it out is if you're just, hey, yep, that was scary. Let's get back to work. Good, let's play. And just show them through your action that you're not scared, and they don't really have a big reason to stay being scared themselves. All right. All right. So when we're dealing with events and we're trying to help our dog get through something scary, right? It's 4th of July, the sounds are going off. There's a thunderstorm that's rolling in. Having background noise, dog's sense of hearing is so good. They're still going to hear it, but it lessens the sounds. It helps them muffle in. They may not hear the further away sounds, right? So yeah, they're still going to react if your next door neighbors are lighting off fireworks, but they may not be hearing the ones a mile away. So it's going to lessen the numbers of words, of sounds that they're hearing. A lot of times you can find, you know, nice music to help them calm down. There's even some of the playlists that I have that for your desensitizing that mix music into the scary noises. They just kind of blend the things together to kind of help use the calming therapy of the music combined with those trigger actions to kind of help move through that. Conversely, sometimes just putting on like a loud action movie on your TV that's got like, you know, gunshots and all that kind of stuff going on, because a lot of our dogs are already desensitized to our televisions because we watch all that kind of stuff. So sometimes instead of having nice, relaxing, calming music, you know, watching a nice action movie is a good way to kind of drown that outside noise out. Again, they'll still hear some of them, but it will lessen it. Obviously, that doesn't work if your dog is afraid of the sound coming out of the television, making all of that noise, but it works great for the dogs that are desensitized to your TV. So generally, like for me, whenever I have, when I was talking about those 2 dogs that I had before, I'd put on a war movie or, you know, Schwarzenegger movie or something like that. And just like boom, 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 right? Stuff making constant noise. And I just turn it up super loud. Visual stimulation can definitely add to sounds, right? So the flash of light with lightning precedes thunder. So see, a lot of dogs will tie those 2 things together, or, you know, the trees blowing, all that kind of stuff. So those become cues to your dog that the scary stuff is coming. So closing your blinds, visually cutting down some of that stuff can help your dogs not tie on to those cues that are coming and help to lessen their concern. Thunder caps, I don't know if you guys are familiar with these, but they're actually like little They're like little mesh, dense mesh hats that go over dogs' eyes that can help with dogs that are have attached kind of that light flash with the sound of thunder or fireworks. So thunder caps are something that can help as well with that visual aid. All of these types of things, you always have some work great for some dogs and actually don't work at all for other dogs. So it's no guarantee that they're going to help, but these are things that can help. In general, interior rooms work the best, right? Getting your dog away from the windows where there's less noise and there's less visual is going to help as well. Using treats, stuffed Kongs, snuffle mats, bones, anything like that that your dog will kind of just dive into is a way to help. You can kind of offer that to your dog if you know that they're going to get scared with the thunderstorm rolling in or the fireworks going off. It helps if you get the dog on it as early as possible, right? So you're not going to wait until they're shaking and panting and climbing the walls. As soon as you hear the first pop go off, you're giving it to the dog so that they can get tucked into that food before they have really built in to that event that's going on. This works best in mild cases and early on in the process. It doesn't work so well for the dogs that are in a full-on event and already to the point where they're super upset, because strong fear is going to kill appetite and they're not going to want to eat. So it really works best early on in the event. And it works really well in our desensitizing work, where we're trying to pair the noise at a very low level with these things. So if you start with playing your low level sound with your snuffle bat or with your Kong, and then you're gradually increasing the noise, then you can get to the point where the dog's like used to chewing on that while the sound is happening. But it's not like, you know, your dog's in a state of a panic on 4th of July and you're like, here's a Kong, right? They may just be like, oh, I can't. So this is part of our treatment program of trying to help get in front of these things, rather than this being something that we're waiting until the dog's in a full on event. In that case, usually medication and management, getting them in a quiet space, is going to be the best way to handle that moment and to just help and support them once they're in it. We can kind of create like safe spaces that we use as a little location. So I was just talking about that, right? So using interior rooms, some dogs will pick it on their own and they'll cue you on that. Like some dogs will love a certain closet, a bathroom. My last dog that was pretty worried about it, he would just go to the end of the hall in our house, was like the deepest area away from everything. And he would just lay there in front of the little closet door. So when you see there's like one particular spot that is the most soundproof in your house, offers the most, make that the place that you give those things, right? So actually create that as a little safe haven. So when you're going to give your snuffle mat or your Kong and you're doing your desensitizing work and you're doing all of that, actually do that in the spot that you're going to use as your cue location for that. So when your dog hears those sounds, they know, go to this spot. This is where the reinforcement is going to happen. This is where this is going to happen. And if you practice that with the absence of the triggers that are going on, this kind of helps to, make this a really heavily rewarded area that the dog associates with being a safe place, a safe tucked in spot. Some dogs love crates, covered crates, right? You can have the door open, not closed, have the door open, throw a blanket over it, but like I said, a lot of times they're going to show you where their favorite place to hide is. So rather than being like, okay, I'm going to pull you out and let's do this work out here in the living room, like do it where they're showing you they want to go when they're worried, so that place has a super strong association with what's going on there. So the two kind of more common medications used for sound sensitivity, I'm going to say this, and I don't want to like get myself in any kind of trouble, but the truth is that not all veterinarians are up on what's best right? And it's getting better, definitely getting better, but there still are some vets around here that will, like, somebody will go and say their dog is afraid of fireworks, and they prescribe a sedative like acepromazine, which is actually not what you want to do. You don't want to sedate a sound sensitive dog, because they still are feeling all of the anxiety and the panic. And so definitely make sure you ask the vet like what they suggest for anxiety. And what you want to see is that they're actually giving you something that treats anxiety related to what's going on, and it's not a sedative. I'm not saying that you wouldn't, if you have a dog that's self-harming and super dangerous, you might have to combine a sedative with another medication, and that's something your vet can help you with. But definitely you want to make sure that what they're using is targeted towards anxiety. And these are the two more common medications that are used to treat specifically noise sensitivity. The problem with noise sensitivity and medication is that a lot of times, like, you can't predict it's going to happen, right? You're out there, you're walking your dog, and suddenly the fireworks go off. So a lot of times the medications are something that do work better for events that you can predict and So definitely, I would suggest that if you have access to a veterinary behaviorist, not just a veterinarian, but a veterinary behaviorist, that's absolutely the best option, because they're going to be much more knowledgeable about all of treating anxiety versus a regular vet. But for a lot of us, that's our only option. And so it can help to go in knowledgeable about what you're asking for, and to see if the vet can help you find that and give you a good treatment program on that. There's also things like body wraps, thunder shirts. There's all these different things where basically they found with a lot of dogs, just that kind of tight feeling of having something wrapped around them can help with anxiety. There's also, I threw on here earmuffs. So the makers of Rec Specs, they also make earmuffs for dogs now. And there's another brand that they make the earmuffs. And like anything, you would have to get your dog used to that ahead of time. But I actually do know of several people for last 4th of July that got those for their dogs and actually had pretty good success with them. So they basically are just, again, it's the thing that if it's thunder and you're getting close by thunder and the dog's feeling the rolling on the ground, the earmuff isn't gonna totally move that out, but it can definitely help with the sound that's going out. So generally, if you're combining medication with a thunder shirt or earmuffs, or doing all these other things, that's where we tend to have the most success with dogs that have extreme reactions to noise sensitivity, is rather than just one of these things, doing all of these things in combination. So you're basically giving your dog attacking it from every angle. There are natural things, the dog appeasing pheromones and lavender and, the different herbal medications and things like that. Make sure that you talk to your veterinarian about combinations, right? So if they're prescribing you a medication, let them know whatever kind of supplements that you're giving the dog in conjunction, so that they can tell you whether or not that's safe to do combined with what they're giving you. So definitely make sure that you talk to your veterinarian about the combo of that, so you're not just adding a bunch of stuff that they're not aware that's happening. I'm going to break for one quick second from the presentation here to see if anyone has any questions of where we're up to now. We're going to go into a little bit more about the treatment and go into a little bit more about the genetics and things like that. But I'm going to stop to see if anyone has any questions about what is going on. So we were told by our vet that Sleo is a sedative and they didn't want to give it to her. So this is the thing, you are going to have different types of medications that are an anti-anxiety medication that are sedative, right? That quality goes along with it. And this is definitely where you want to talk to your vet about when and why you're using it and whether or not that is appropriate for that moment, right? So if it's something where actually having a little sedative on board is going to help the dog rest, not self-harm, not, you know, fly themselves out the window, bounce against the walls, you might be like, oh, okay, maybe this is worth doing. But if it's maybe your dog is just startling to certain noises out when you're out on a walk and it's a one and done, right? Like they hear the car backfire and that's it. And yeah, in that case, it wouldn't be worse sedating your dog so that you can take them for a walk. In that case, you might be looking at other types of medication, anxiety medications that aren't as sedative. So you look at those kind of things to see. So if, for example, 4th of July in the United States is when more dogs than ever go missing because they literally just panic and run away. So in that case, you're like, okay, maybe I do want this dog to just want to sleep in the closet and not be freaked out and not be self-harming. And that might be, okay, then I'm going to use that medication. And also like Sileo, it's a great thing that's come onto the market, but it's also expensive. And it's not super long lasting, right? So it's the kind of thing that you kind of pick and choose when that event it might be appropriate to use versus something that's a little bit more generalized, right? So even just putting on dog on a general anti-anxiety medication for during your desensitizing treatment might be something that you look at doing rather than something like that that's more of an event-driven moment. Can noise aversion be learned from another dog? Yes, they can. What I would say though, is that we get into genetics here, right? And so it's super common for dogs to like watch another dog, see what they're worried about. If that dog has the genetic makeup to have its own sound sensitivity, that can become the trigger that fires their own sensitivity. But you can have dogs that have like just bomber proof genetics on their own side. And they're like, I don't know what you're worried about. And they may be worried about that dog's anxiety, but not tie it to the noise. So for example, Butters, our golden retriever, he lived with the two. So we had an event where we were out hiking and this person pulled up right next to the trailhead and they were shooting automatic guns between us and our car. And I came around the corner coming back to the car and all of a sudden it's just boom, boom. And it was so loud and it was so right there that like I had 5 dogs with me. They all were like, wow, and started running the other direction. Quick, we just got a little bit away and they restabilized. 2 of those dogs after that event were terrified of any loud noises. The other 3, no problem at all. Right. And so they didn't care. They were like, oh, they startled, but then they got over it and they didn't hold on to it. The other 2, I then had to work a serious program to try to get those dogs back to the point of being okay. And then along comes Butters, the puppy. And like that dog you could light fireworks off next to his head and he would have stayed asleep. I didn't care at all, even though he lived with 2 dogs that absolutely panicked whenever they heard noises. So they won't necessarily pick it up if they are super, super stable themselves. However, if they have any predispositions themselves, it's very easy for them to pick up on the other dog's reactions. And so the other thing that you can do is make sure when you have a puppy and you have a sound sensitive dog, if there's multiple people in the house, divide, right? So it's like whenever I have a dog that comes to stay with us that is worried about fireworks, I go off with them in one little room and then Mike goes off in the other room playing with our dogs so that they're not sitting there watching this dog trying to figure out why he's so scared. So you can certainly do that. Yeah, so definitely single event learning can cause sound sensitivity. So you can have, you know, we have dogs in our area that after the fire, right, this big massive event, and now the dogs are afraid of loud noises because there were so many things exploding in the fire and there were, you know, planes driving, you know, the bomber retardant planes coming right over houses. And so dogs that never showed any kind of sound sensitivity at all, or like whenever they hear planes over top of the head. So you can definitely, if it's a big enough fright, you can have a single event that just kind of fires that off. Or for some dogs, it can be a slow, steady thing, right? So it can be either or, but you definitely can have dogs that have a single event set something off. So, and again, that tells us when we have dogs and we have young dogs that do not have sound sensitivity and something happens, right? Your fire smoke alarm goes off, or, there's construction next door. You look at your dogs. What are they doing? Do they look okay, or do they look concerned? If they look concerned, do something, reward them, play with them, get them out of the house, that kind of stuff, so that you're not just like ignoring the fact that they're there and getting more and more worried about it. When I went to the construction site with Nick for the first time, I kept looking as the nail guns were going off and stuff like that to see how he was doing. He was just asleep in the car, but I'm always checking with new noises with him to see if he's going to be concerned about it. Okay, Moose is terrified of fire and any noise or smell associated with it. If it's on the TV, the barbecue, the neighbors, would you do the same thing? Yeah. So basically, if any sound that the dog's picking up on, if you have a way to record it, if you have a way to recreate that noise, you're trying to basically do that, take the volume all the way down on those sound sensitivity playlists I have. There's everything from you can go, I have some of them listed there. There's also websites you can go to that have sounds for editing movies and stuff like that. And you can get really specific things. I can't remember who it was, but in the academy last year, their dog was didn't like the sound of someone slamming their car trunk, right? And so it was you can find that. You can go shutting car trunk, you can and you can find all sorts of things and then record them and put them on a loop, and then basically just take the volume all the way down and then kind of gradually increase that as you're doing stuff that the dog likes to do. So as you're giving them a bone, as you're giving them a chew toy, as you're giving them a snuffle mat, and then you just kind of have that volume down super, super low, and then gradually increasing it as the sessions go along. All right, we are going to dive back in. I'll come back for more questions, but we're going to go ahead and dive back in. And then also when we talk about sounds and types of sounds, thunderstorms are different than firework events in that there's also a lot happening atmospherically, right? So you have changes in barometer pressure, you have vibration of the earth, you have all these other things that can go along with that. So for some dogs, it's a combination of those things, and it's not just the noise. So you can have dogs that are afraid of fireworks that are fine with thunderstorms, and you can have dogs that are afraid of thunderstorms and totally fine with fireworks, because it can be specific to those events that are tied around it. Absolutely, a dog that shows sound sensitivity to one noise is at a higher risk of generalizing to more noises. So they can develop more sound sensitivities over time. So you want to be on the lookout for that. And you want to, just because they're fine with fireworks doesn't mean you don't work thunderstorm noises, because they may generalize that down the road. So it's definitely important to make sure you work a full program. All right, we're going to talk about the difference between desensitize and counter conditioning, right? Because I think sometimes people get a little confused about this and try to use a counter conditioning program when they should be desensitizing. So with desensitizing, the idea is to introduce the sound at such a low level the dog doesn't really notice or isn't stressed by it, and then getting below that stress reaction. So it's kind of like the difference of when we're doing our reactivity training, we talk about being way outside of threshold. So the dog is reactive to a dog if they're 50 yards away, but totally fine if the dog's 100 yards away. Well, desensitizing, that's what we're wanting to be. We're 100 yards away instead of being right up against that threshold. So we want it to be easy. We want the sounds to be so low that it's easy for the dog not to be worried about it. We then pair that with positive things the dog already enjoys doing, right? So we're pairing that with treats, food puzzles, engagement, and things like that, so that they are just getting this association of that this is just a calm, happy event, to be chewing on this with that little pop, pop, pop happening in the background that they can just barely hear. And the goal is to gradually increase that stimulus at a rate the dog's not noticing, right? If they're noticing, we're going too fast. So we want it to be super, super gradual. This is preventative work. This is about getting in front of it, right? Helping our dogs get used to these things. And if you have a dog that is got severe sound sensitivity, this is how we approach it, because we need the dog to be under threshold. We need to get in front of that fear. We don't want to be trying to practice with them when they're already in a fearful state. We want to get them calm, relaxed, and then work on moving this in. So what can happen if you get this wrong and you have your volumes too high and you're pushing too much is we can poison our positive things. By every time we give them a Kong, fireworks happen. Every time we give them a snuffle mat, the smoke alarm goes off. And so they start to not trust that Kong anymore because it makes bad things happen, right? So we have to be really careful about making sure we set our desensitizing at a level that is like infuriatingly frustrating for ourselves, because we want it to go faster. We want it to be like, okay, let's over and done this in 3 sessions, right? And so we push way too fast. And so instead of creating this nice, calm, relaxed thing where our dog is just chilling and sucking on a nice tasty Kong with a little bit of mood music in the background that has a few little things that they're like, right? We want it to be nice, right? But we as people tend to not do that. We tend to be like, okay, well, he's not reacting at 1 click. Let me try a couple more. Let me get, okay, let me back it off a little bit. That's how we tend to approach desensitizing, because we're impatient about it. We want it to go faster. We're worried, oh my God, it's only 6 weeks until that event happens. I got to push this. And we actually end up oftentimes poisoning our positive things by always pairing them with that stressful thing, right? So you got to be careful about that. Versus counter conditioning is where that we are pairing that negative thing with a positive thing. The scary sound happens, a good thing happens. So with this, what we're trying to do is our timing matters, right? So instead of feeding the dog a treat, boom, the noise goes off. Feeding our dog a treat, boom, the noise goes off. It's the other way around. The dog hears the noise, we feed a treat. So now the treat, the noise is creating the treat instead of the other way around, right? And that's important because a lot of times people, we start just feeding the dog, right? So the noises are happening, so we're just feeding the dog, and then we're feeding before the noise happens. And again, we can get into poisoning that food and having our dogs go, oh God, every time she gives me a piece of string cheese in the evening, there's like fireworks noises. So we want to make sure that we're actually, that the noise is happening and then we're feeding, the noise is happening and then we're feeding. This only works if our dog is sub-threshold, right? So if they've already, the fear's already gone running, then they're not going to take the food because it's going to override that. So this only works if our dog is still sub-threshold, but we can get a lot of times right up against that. This works best and well for early experiences, right? So you're out walking with your dog and, you know, someone starts shooting their gun and you're like, oh, food. Right? Pop, oh, here's food. Pop, oh, here's food. When the dog is still kind of like, I'm not sure. Should I be worried about this? Or you're out walking your puppy, you know, you're taking them out for your nice little socializing walk and a car backfires. And it's just like, boom, cookie, right? So that you're basically just pairing these scary sounds immediately with something good and you're carrying on. We talked about that in the puppy prevention, right? Scary thing happens. You're like, oh, hey, let's play. Right? So it works best if you know, that it's a sound that you can't control. It happened, you can't stop. And so you basically go, okay, the best thing I can do here is pair this with something good so that my dog doesn't hang on to this as a scary thing. So, and then the other part of it is that we sometimes do this and then let go of it. So if you're out and about and there's, Emily just took my cord off, just pulled the whole thing out. Okay. So you got to keep it going, right? So if you're going, okay, I'm going to counter condition fireworks. It's 4th of July. Boom, here's a cookie. Boom, here's a cookie. There might be 100 firework pops, right? So if you're not continuing, you're letting go of it, and you're actually what you started with by the time you get done is going to be long gone, right? So if I start doing this, I have to be committed. So I'm going to make sure I've got like a lot of stuff available. I got little tiny pieces of stuff. I've got kibble. I've got a lot of stuff to work with so that I can keep that going. Or I'm going to be like, okay, how do I get out of here? I have literally, with dogs that I've been training, put them in the car and driven to get away from the fireworks so I could stop my counter conditioning. Because I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to feed this dog 10 pounds of food and I'm going to run out. People aren't slowing down. So I've put the dogs in the car and driven up, just pull off the road up at the top of the hill outside of town and wait until it slows down and then come back down. So I've done that with dogs. Those 2 dogs that I was describing that I had to bring back from that event, I had to do that for a couple of years. I had to actually just put them in the car and drive away from the noise. So you have to think about that if you've started the counter conditioning and then you abandon it because you're like, okay, well, I feel like that was enough food, and the noise is still happening, then you're going to undo what you just started with. So you got to keep it going if you're going to go with the counter conditioning. What I will say to that is if you have a young dog and they're not actually noise sensitive yet, and you're doing this to prevent it, a lot of times you'll see you don't have to keep doing it because the dog's not noticing anymore, right? So early on with Butters, when he was a puppy, I did a lot of counter conditioning because he lived with those 2 other dogs and I was worried about him developing it. But then it was like after I did it for a little while and he would be like, okay, I'm kind of tired now. I'm going to go lay down. And it was like, oh, okay, well, if you're going to take a nap, I guess I don't have to wake you up to give you the counter conditioning cookie with the noise. So if they're okay, they'll show you that. But if you have a dog that is startling to each noise and you're pairing with food, you've got to keep it going or get out of there however you can to change that up. So with our older dogs or adult dogs, when we're working a sound sensitivity program, one, we want to make sure that any physical pain our dog is in is being treated by a veterinarian. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, why that matters. You want to have medications available, right? So if you know your dog is sound sensitive, even if they haven't had like a major panic event yet, have something, like have some kind of medication available that your vet says is safe for your dog to be on. Tell them, know how much to give, how often you can give, all of that kind of stuff. Have that available because you can have events like, we had a new neighbor move in that was lighting off M80s, which are like little sticks of dynamite that shook the whole house. So it's like when you have something like that, you a lot of times have to make an immediate decision to be able to get the dog going. If you're using medications for an event like that, again, get the advice from your vet of when to give it, because most of the time it's going to work best if you have it on board before the noise starts. So if you know the noise in your neighborhood is going to kick off at 7 o'clock when it gets dark or 9 o'clock when it gets dark, give it at 8:30 so that has a chance to be on board before the noise starts. Most of those things work better if they're fully loaded in the dog's system before it starts. Or if you're doing a more generalized medication, maybe you have to start it a couple of days beforehand to get it going. So again, follow your vet's advice on how to give that. Create safe spaces. Try to find a closet or inner room with no doors. In my new house, I actually have created a walk-in closet between my bedroom and my bathroom that is big enough to be a dog safe zone. I had that in mind when I created it, so that I have a spot in my house where actually there's no outside windows that I can close down. It's going to be a well insulated room. So create a safe space, closets, and find something like that. Work with your dog beforehand on having good, tasty things there, stuffed Kongs, snuffle mats, their favorite bones, that kind of stuff. It's okay to comfort your dog, right? So if your dog is freaking out and they are scared, it's okay to pet them, to tell them they're okay, but keep your emotions as calm as you can, right? You want to stay calm yourself so that you're not making them more anxious with your own anxiety, because we know when we have dogs that are anxious, our anxiety and their anxiety pairs up very well. So we want to make sure that we are calm and relaxed during that, even though we can still offer them kindness and sympathy and love and all of that kind of stuff. Do not leave your dogs home alone if you can avoid it at all possible. Don't go out to the family barbecue on 4th of July if your dog is afraid of fireworks, because separation combined with that fear can create catastrophic events. So please do not do that. If you have to, make sure you have them in that safe space. They're medicated, they're inside that nice little cozy tucked in place. Turn radios on, turn TVs on, do everything you can do to drown out the noise, but do try, if at all possible, not to leave them alone, because I could tell you horror story after horror story of dogs that have done a lot of damage to themselves by being left alone. Keep in mind, if they're sensitive to one sound, they can generalize to others. Right. So if they're afraid of fireworks, they may become afraid of thunder. They may become afraid of car noises because they heard a car backfire. They may tie it on to other different things. Also, again, as I said at the very beginning, it doesn't have to be volume. Dogs can generalize to weird sounds. I think I've shared with some of the people in this group I've talked to personally. Emily is afraid of one sound: car shocks squishing as they go over a speed bump. Just that little sound that they make. It's just the randomest sound, but she just got sensitized to it one day, and I had to do a ton of work to get her okay with cars going over bumps because of that little swishing sound. The fact that she generalized to that made me work a lot of sound sensitivity with her, because that tells me that's in her, right? And I have to be on the lookout for that and always be ready to help her with that. So a couple of myths on sound sensitivity, and you see this all over social media of people saying, don't comfort your dog, you're reinforcing their fear. You're not. You can't reinforce fear. Dogs don't want to be afraid, right? So you can make their fear worse by being freaked out yourself and being so upset that they're upset that you're just like, oh my God, you're okay, and like pouring that on. It's not going to help them, right? It's not going to make them want to feel more afraid. It's just not going to help them in that moment to see you freaking out. Like, I always like to use this analogy of like, could you imagine if you're hitting turbulence on a plane and the pilot came on and he was like, it's okay, we're going to be all right, everyone, just put your seatbelts on, right? Like you'll be like, wait, what? Why is he so-and-so? But they don't, right? They're like, okay, we're going to hit a little bit of turbulence here. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be okay, right? You're like, okay, all right. So that's what you want to make sure you're not you don't want to be freaking out. So when your dog looks to you, they see you going, oh God, if she's this worried about it, it must be bad, right? We want them to look at us and go, okay, well, they seem all right and they seem to know a lot. So I think I'll trust that they're okay, and I'll let them comfort me. So comfort your dogs. I had a dog of those two dogs, one of them that in the very early stages, I literally just had to bear hug her at the worst of it, because she would throw herself at walls and try to get out. And I just did. I hugged her and pet her and held her, and then she would just kind of relax into my body and calm down. I got her to the point through all of this work we're talking about to where she could do it. She could do it. She would sometimes start panting and get a little bit wide-eyed, but she stopped all of that panic and everything. I did the combination of all the stuff that we're talking about here. The other one you hear a lot, it's your fault. You didn't properly socialize them, right? That's the problem. You did this, right? You're not leader enough. You're not confident enough. And so your dog doesn't feel safe with you, and you over coddled them, and you didn't socialize them enough. Not true, right? So it's definitely, like I said, there's a lot you can do to help to prevent dogs from attaching to certain sounds. But if there's a strong genetic component to sound sensitivity, and also things like pain, trigger stacking events, right? You get a scary enough event, things that can happen. So a lot of things can start with the dog later in life, even though you've done everything right to properly train them and socialize them. So you have to have, the dog has to have that genetic material to be concerned about things, to develop it. You can have a dog that's predisposed to sound sensitivity, not socialize them, let them live in a quiet little bubble. And yes, they are probably going to be more easily set off by sounds, but it's not your fault, right? I promise you, if you're here and in the academy, you care about your dog so much that I know you did everything you could possibly do for them. So it's not your fault. And so don't beat yourself up about it. So I want to talk about a couple of fun research studies. I will put notes when I share this. I'll attach the studies so you guys can go and read them a little bit more yourselves. But I want to talk about this, especially for dogs that develop sound sensitivity later in their life. There is some research being done to show the correlation between dogs in sound sensitivity and dogs that are in pain. And so you have older arthritic dogs, you have a dog with an injury, and the development of it. So you don't have to try to write this down. I will tag it so you guys have an easy way to upload that. But basically, this was a study done studying that. In most of these cases where pain is related to the sound sensitivity, it happens later in a dog's life, right? So this is the sound sensitivity that might not start until the dog's 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. They've been fine all along. And all of a sudden, as an older dog, they're like, they're sensitive to the pain. Like I described, out of those 2 dogs, one was the 10-year-old border collie who never showed any signs. He was arthritic. And so I wouldn't be surprised if that was a big, strong correlation to why this happened. What we mean by control cases, just since you guys aren't reading the study, and we have control cases are the dogs that they put into this group that did not have physical pain, that didn't have arthritic issues and issues like that. And then the clinical cases were the dogs that were also showed signs of musculoskeletal issues, arthritis, things of that sort. The clinical cases in this study, when they combined pain relief management with the treatment programs, there was a really strong response to the treatment program. So we need to make sure, if we have older dogs showing sound sensitivity, that part of our program is making sure any arthritic pain, any pain they have in their body, that we're talking about to our veterinarians about how to treat that pain, so that's not exacerbating the problem that we're dealing with. So anytime you have a dog that is older and suddenly starts showing sound sensitivity, make sure that you have a thorough exam done with a vet to see if they're in pain, right? To see if that's why this is happening. We don't want to just treat the sound sensitivity and not address the pain, because we may end up right back where we started again. Their theory is that basically the startle response clenches the muscles and causes the dog's pain to be exacerbated in that moment, right? If you can think about whenever you've got a sore muscle and you move and you do a sudden movement, and how much that causes that sharp pain to go through the body. So the idea here is that perhaps the startling to the noise then pairs with that sharp pain, therefore making the dog anticipate the pain in relation to that sound. We also see in other studies that have been done, and in this study as well, that there's a pretty strong connection between dogs that are sound sensitive and dog reactive to other dogs, right? So a lot of times we can see these things and don't even understand that they're related to each other. And so the idea with that is that if a dog's in chronic pain and another dog comes running up to them, that your dog may be using reactivity to prevent themselves from being put into these painful situations. So if your dog has arthritis in their neck and a dog comes running up and your dog whips its head around to see the dog coming running up, and the shoot of pain goes down their neck. Now, if that happens every time, they're associating that with this approach of a dog, right? So we can have dogs that go into reactivity because they're anticipating the pain of another dog. And a lot of times you'll see that when you have older dogs that are totally grumpy with dogs that are young and bouncy, and they come pushing up into their space because they don't feel safe with this dog, because this dog causes them to feel pain. So again, when we have older dogs that show an increase in reactivity or an increase in sound sensitivity, we need to make sure their bodies aren't feeling physical pain. And that if so, we need to be thinking about, in addition to our training program, how do we treat that pain? How do we make their bodies feel more comfortable, rather than just thinking we can train our way out of something that's physical? So definitely, we need to make sure that we are working with a vet that can help us through these and complement our training program. It's also good to note that just treating the pain is not going to fix the problem if you already have a persistent issue going on, because those associations have already been laid down and paired with that. So if you have a dog that has learned flinching when fireworks go off makes my neck hurt, and you make the pain go away, the sound may still be causing that same fear that that flinching is going to happen. So that's why we do both the pain modification and the behavior modification, so that we make sure that we're helping our dog let go of those associations and create new ones. So you want to pair the both together. I thought this was an interesting study and was going to share this with you, and I'll link this as well. So this was an interesting thing where they're looking more into kind of the causes and where this comes from, and how this is related to dogs. This particular study was done using German Shepherds, and like a lot of them, and made me think of some of you guys in this group here that have our fearful German Shepherds. And so what's interesting about this is they were actually able to find DNA markers, right, that relate to these two specific types of fear. So they looked at fear in German Shepherds to noise sensitivity and fear of strangers, right? So we have that stranger danger, and we have fear sensitivity, fear to noise sensitivity, that's really common in a lot of breeds. But so it's not that it's only German Shepherds, that's what they did in the study. They had access to like 300 plus German Shepherds, and they basically just worked with that breed to isolate down where these things were coming from. And so the interesting thing about this as well is that they're the same areas of the brain that we see in humans that include the regulation of these different systems in our brain related to anxiety and stress. And so that's pretty interesting, and a pretty strong correlation to the genetic component that we've been talking about here. So there's definitely way more that needs to be done into this. But looking at how these things overlap, and how, okay, we tend to have a lot of these similar issues where you have dogs that are fearful and sound sensitive, and reactive and sound sensitive, and painful and sound sensitive. And so it's important to understand that, because I think a lot of times we get disappointed in ourselves, or we get frustrated of like, we're not doing a good enough job training, or we're not doing a good enough job being puppy parents and like raising our dogs to be bomber proof. Well, that's really hard to do when you're dealing with like actual like processes in the brain that you have no control over. So I want you guys to cut yourselves a little bit of slack and be like, okay, maybe it's not my fault that my dog has this DNA marker and I didn't put that in there. So maybe I'm doing an okay job with what I've got to work with here. And what's nice is that now that they're doing more work in this, perhaps we're going to get some better treatment options for them and more information about how to help. But I want you to look at this, glutamate and dopamine, right? If you've done the reactive dog class, you've heard me talk about dopamine a lot, right? And so we're dealing with these similar systems. So the same things that help us with our reactive dogs, our decompression, our chewing, our scent work, our things like that, are things that we want to make sure that we're helping our sound sensitivity dogs with decompressing as well. So after you have a big event, right? It's 4th of July. Okay, now it's the 5th and the 6th and the 7th of July, and you're out there walking your reactive dog and it's reacting to everything. And you're like, oh my God, I am a terrible dog trainer. Right? I thought I was doing really good with my reactivity. I thought I had it all figured out. I did a terrible job. No, right? You're dealing with a dog that is in the same trigger stacked state that you would have with aggression reactivity when we're talking about sound sensitivity, right? So cut yourselves some slack. This one I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but again, it's just kind of looking at the genetic components of behavior problems and kind of diving into more deeply into that. So I'll share that with you guys who like to kind of do a little bit more work with that. So because we're seeing this research coming out and we're looking more and more into these genetic components and the what's happening in the brain and like what's happening internally inside of our dogs when they're having these anxiety issues. If you have a dog with severe noise sensitivity, I definitely suggest that you consult with your veterinarian and bring them on board with this. It's not just a training issue. It can also be a medical issue. If you have access to a veterinary behaviorist, even better. Again, not all of us have access to that because there just aren't that many of them. So it may take you a long time to get a hold of one or be able to get in with one. You a lot of times can call different vets because vets, like a normal veterinarian, a lot of times they have their own special interests. Right. So I can tell you in our valley, the vets who are good that work on sounds, who like care about anxiety and have dug in and done their own research on it, that go to the conferences and learn about it. I can tell you which vets are best at orthopedics, even though they can all fix a broken leg. I can tell you who has the most interest in it and who does the most on it. So just because you only don't have a veterinary behaviorist around you doesn't mean you can't find a vet who has a little bit more experience with it. You can ask different trainers in the area. You can ask different pet owners in the area and find out of people who have seen vets in the area and get their ideas on that. Because even if you don't have a behaviorist in your area, you may be able to find a vet in your area who is just a little bit more into that interest on their own, so they know more about it than other vets. Definitely don't, like, if you go to your vet and they kind of poo-poo the idea and like act like it's not a big deal, don't be afraid to call someone else, right? It's your dog's. If you got your own diagnosis of something, you would probably want a second opinion. If you went to a vet, if you went to a doctor for your own thing that you were concerned about and they were like, don't worry about it, and you were like, no, I'm worried about it, you would go see someone else. So you don't have to like just take the one vet's word for it. If you're like, no, I really feel like I need more help than this, and they're not feeling very helpful to you. I don't want to bash vets at all, because I love vets and I was a tech forever. And I will tell you right now is not an easy time to get a lot of great help, because they're so overworked right now. The veterinary community is stressed beyond belief. Everybody in COVID went out and got a dog, went out and got a cat. And I mean, the vets that I'm best friends with, like, this lady works all day long from morning to night. All she's doing is taking care of dogs. She's exhausted, stressed, and pushed to the limit. So in saying what I just said, I don't want you to take that against your vet. If they don't know a lot about it and don't have a lot of time, and they've got dogs laying in the back that have a broken leg that need fixed, like, they may not have the time to like spend an hour with you trying to get into something they don't know a lot about. So don't hold that against them. And I'm not telling you not to like your vet if they don't give you the answer that you like, but I'm saying that you may want to just see if you can get some help elsewhere, or at least find out if they would be willing to look into something more deeply for you. But do keep that in mind. They're under a lot of stress right now. And also because of the way COVID has changed how we interact with vets, right? We like pass them off and they take them in and then they treat them and they give them, hand them back out to you. So a lot of times conveying information is kind of challenging and hard for vets right now. So the end result here, the last thing that I'm gonna, before we get into a conversation, question and answer, is that desensitizing programs, they can really work. They do. I've worked with some severe cases. I've worked with dogs that when I was working in the vet clinic, like I said, that literally jumped through windows and like not open windows, closed windows, broke the glass, jumped through windows. Dogs that bolted and freaked out and ran away, dogs with real severe issues, dogs that wouldn't eat for a week, things like this. The key to it is it has to be done frustratingly slowly. It has to be done tediously. You have to take that volume all the way down. It's like there's a few of you in the program that are working separation anxiety from the ground up. It's like that, right? Where the first time you're like, I have to leave for 30 seconds, right? Okay, 40 seconds. You're like, this is ridiculous. How am I ever going to get to leaving for work, right? When I'm only leaving for 15 seconds. But it has to be done at such a low level that the dog isn't triggering to the fear in order for us to move this through. The earliest part is the hardest part, and then it gets easier as you go along. So it definitely works. The one thing that is different to sound sensitivity work than any other kind of behavior modification is that we have the least amount of control of it. So separation anxiety, you have control whether you leave the house or not, right? Dog reactivity, you have control whether you take your dog out of the house to see other dogs or not. But with sound sensitivity, you can't control what your dog hears and what the noises are that people make outside of your house. So it's because of that can be a much slower progress, and it's dips and valleys. You are going to make progress. You're going to do great. And then you are going to be out there walking your dog and boom, car backfires, or boom, somebody starts lighting off fireworks and you're, a quarter of a mile from home and you're stuck out there, right? So this stuff happens, and it's why sound sensitivity can be a long road to recovery, because we cannot control the noise of the world, whereas we can control most other things far easier than we can with sound sensitivity. So you need to expect it to be this kind of a roller coaster. And whenever you have those setbacks, to understand, that doesn't mean you're starting back over. All of the work that you did help, because when you start back over again, your dog's going to be able to progress through that more quickly because of the other work that you've done before. So it's not starting back over, it's just kind of starting back. You kind of slide back a little bit and you have to regain your ground to that. And because we are potentially dealing with a genetic issue or a pain issue that you can't perhaps fix the pain completely, you then can have these kind of surging events where it's almost like trigger stacking, right? Where your dog has a flare up of their arthritis and now they're more sensitive to sound, right? Or so you can have those other things. They have a bad sound event and their reactivity comes up. So you can definitely see these things kind of interrelating. And so sound sensitivity in general is definitely one of the more difficult programs to work because of that. Unless you have a dog who is they're still in the isolated to one sound thing, and it's a sound you can sort of control, right? So examples, the cell phone, right? So I have had people with the cell phone one, and it's like, okay, well, we can silence them and turn them off and work on that only at specific training times. I've had dogs where it's like, you know how when your battery on your smoke detector starts to go out, it beeps, right? So I've had dogs that sound completely freaks them out. I've had dogs that it's the ding of a toaster oven, right? So there's definitely, if your dogs are in those, because you can control those sounds, you can get through those sounds a lot more successfully than if it's generalized noises, or it's fireworks, it's thunderstorms, it's things like that that you can't control. So I'm going to look through our questions that have come in here. So I've never noticed Summit to be sound sensitive, but she'll occasionally bark at the thunder. Callie used to be super sensitive, and we used a thunder shirt and regular with the adaptive. Yeah. So some dogs will bark instead of act scared. And it's almost like a reactivity barking, like a, defensive, like territorial type of thing, where they're yelling at the thunder. What I would say to that is, because she's not an old dog yet, that she's a dog you would be on that lookout for potentially developing sensitivity, because of, if she's barking and she's reacting that way to the noise, if as she gets older she starts to get uncomfortable and starts to get arthritic, that little response can be something that pairs with the pain and then gets you more into that. So I would go ahead and work thunder as a sound desensitizing program, so that she stops caring about it and stops barking at it, so that you don't put her in that kind of category of kind of at risk of maybe that becoming a problem later on. That's the German Shepherd study. It is fascinating. I was like, what? Whenever I read that and got so into it. And so I'm going to link that, because it's a pretty lengthy study for you guys to be able to look more deeply into that. My vet does acupuncture. Do you have any thoughts or experience in relation to anxiety treatment? Yeah. So my personal thing is, like, more the better. Try it. Like, there's no reason, acupuncture is definitely something that is, I find, like, certain people respond really well to it, and certain people are like, that didn't do anything for me. So we don't like, and I think it's the same with dogs, right? So there's no reason not to try something like that to see if it helps the dog, because definitely acupuncture and all sorts of those kind of those supportive therapies and things like that are definitely positive things. And also, acupuncture is not just something that works well with anxiety, but also pain, right? My chronic back pain was fixed by acupuncture. I had back issues for 15 years that acupuncturist fixed in 3 visits. So I'm a strong, like, yes, try it. Because I personally had really good success with that. And I had really good success with it with my German Shepherd, who had to have back surgery. Okay, the genetic studies bring up question for me. My miniature Schnauzer barks at strangers, strange dogs, and I've been working on with it. I've had many people say typical Schnauzer behavior. Can reactive behavior like barking be genetically typical to a breed? Yeah, it can, because you have certain breeds that are more vocal about things and have more of like a bark first, think about it later attitude about things. And the other thing is that not all barking is like, not all barking has like this strong emotional thing behind it, right? So like when Nick sees something he doesn't understand, a lot of times he's like, bark, bark. Like, just like, it's just like his first like thought is to just say, hey, what's that? Right. And he's not necessarily even having a concern about it. And a lot of times I can hear in the pitch of his voice, like I can hear the things that he's actually concerned about and the things that he's just talking about and stuff like that. So you definitely have dogs like that typically have like, so as a dog trainer, if someone comes to me and like, yeah, Schnauzer's on the list, a couple of the other terriers are Shelties and Aussies, and say my dog's barks a lot, I'm like, yeah, they probably do, right? Because it's so strong in their personalities and the way they do things. That doesn't mean you can't like fix things, but what I always tell people that have dogs in the categories of these breeds that are naturally barky is that you'll probably never get rid of the first bark. What you can get to is to where you can turn off the barking that continues after it. The reflexive bark is almost impossible to stop with certain breeds of dogs, because it's kind of like the second they notice that, it's like their mouth is connected to the noticing, right? And it's, you know, so you can't necessarily stop that because it's so reflexive, but the continuing you can. Yeah, people are being so rude to their vets for things beyond their control. It's a hard time. It is. It's a really hard time. I know a lot of people in the vet industry, and it's a very hard time for them, because like obviously we're so attached to our animals and we love them so much, and when they're hurt and we take them to the vet, and the technician is like, I have to take your dog away from you, you're like, no. And then you have to like, no, don't take them. And then they take them, and now we're like, you know, mama bear, right? We're like really nervous and really upset about everything, and then we're super upset if we don't get all the information we wanted or needed, or some of our questions didn't get answered. It's super, super frustrating right now. So be kind. The best advice I can give, written lists, right? So if you're taking your dog to the vet and you don't get to talk to your vet, written list that you can hand to the technician so that they don't have to try to remember everything that you just told them to tell to the vet. Write it out, send it to them, so that you have more of a chance for the vet to be able to actually get that whole list of things. Be patient. Don't be upset when you have to kind of call and ask multiple times. Pua gets on high alert when she hears sirens and most often waits for us to howl before she starts howling herself. There's been 1 or 2 times where she's howled by herself. Is this a scared reaction or a husky thing? No, it's howling along with siren noises. Most dogs I have not seen demonstrating fearful behavior along with that. Some of them I think are scared of those, but when you see them kind of like, you know, seeing the thing come along and then it gets closer and then they're like, I'm going to talk along with that. Many, many times that is not related to fear. And I wouldn't be super concerned about it unless I saw, when I was talking about the earlier indications, if you saw body language and behaviors pairing with the howling, then I would be a little bit more concerned about wanting to help them with that. During separation anxiety training, I noticed more sensitivity towards sounds around the house. Yes. I'm not sure if I'm capable of counter conditioning, sensitizing another thing, but I probably have to add this to our list. Yeah, but what I would say you can do with that, Annika, is to do it easy. So like just find some recordings that you can put on super, super low while you're doing other stuff. So like when you're doing your shaping games or you're doing stuff like that, if you have time, just like put that on in the background super, super low so that you can kind of multitask and have that just slipping into something else that you're doing. Because definitely when you're like, it's not so big of a thing now, but once you get to where you're like leaving her for a couple of hours and then a scary sound happens, that can set you back. So we definitely would like to, especially if there's certain, like when you're watching your videos of your separation anxiety training, if you can hear the noises or if you're aware of what they're happening, take note of them and put those on the list of things that you make sure that you add into that. So it's like, okay, if like she heard a door slam or she heard, you know, a siren or whatever, then it's like, okay, I want to make sure that I'm desensitizing those things at other times so that doesn't derail my separation anxiety later on down. All right. Yeah, all right. So those are all the questions that are in there. Oh, yeah, in there now. So if anyone has any that you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask them, or you can type them in and ask if you want. But my takeaway with the whole thing is get your desensitizing programs, whether you are preventatively doing this with a puppy or you have a dog that you're trying to treat with it. If you have a puppy, you probably get to move, you get to move through it faster, right? So you get to move from the up the volume clicks faster. You're just basically going to do it at that volume level for a couple of days, click it up, do it at that volume level for a couple of days, click it up. And if at any point you see any responses from the dog, you click it down. Right? The idea is that it's background noise and they pay no more attention to it than they do your television or the sounds coming out of your phone or any. So that tells you what desensitizing looks like, right? If you can sit there and watch a video on your phone and your dog's asleep on your lap and their head never even raises, or they're, chewing on a bone and they never even slow down to doing it. That's what your desensitizing should look like when you're doing your sounds, that whatever they're doing, it doesn't interrupt it. So, work that in and work on that with your puppies, preventatively work through all the different kinds of noises, babies crying, kids screaming, fireworks, thunderstorms, gunshots, car doors slamming, motorcycles, skateboards, like all of those different sounds have the potential of becoming sensitized with the dog. Like I said, I have those sounds playlists. And a lot of them just have all of that mixed in. So you can just put it on in the background, turn it way down, and just kind of have that playing as you're doing stuff. All right. Anybody have any questions they want to ask? Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. I will link those studies for those of you who want to look into it more. And I'm a little science nerd, so as I find more, I'll link those as well, because I think it's just fascinating to look more deeply into this so that we can help our dogs out. Thanks for coming, you guys. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye.